All right, good morning, church. It's a pleasure to be here to speak with you. I have a lot to cover, so I'm going to get right into it. No slides, as usual. You won't ever see slides from me, so sorry about that. If you like those, I just don't do them. The question that was posed was basically have a lesson on marriage and divorce and related subjects. And so, unfortunately, that first part is all I'll be able to cover today, marriage and divorce. It's quite important and quite lengthy, and honestly, it could fill an entire year's worth of a class, because that's what I did. And previously, I've taught on this subject before, and took almost a whole year to go through it, but I have about an hour today. So we'll get right into it. In the beginning, God. I started off with that the last time I stood before you, and I start with it again. In my opinion, it is the four most important words of the Bible. It is a foundation upon which everything in the Bible is built, our lives and everything that is in the world. In fact, it's either true or not true. Either in the beginning, God is true or not true. If it isn't true, then an honest person will look and understand that nothing in this world makes any sense at all. And that is a true statement. And nothing makes any sense at all if it is not true. If it is true, then we have some significant implications in our lives. And specifically, that is that there is a God. He does exist. And perhaps we can know his will. That's really the question I think that would be more important to understand, not whether or not God exists. You can walk out your door and recognize that. At least anyone who's, again, an honest person can recognize that. It also means that we fall underneath God's authority. And that is what I'm really going to talk a little bit about before I get into the marriage subject, because I personally believe it is a very important topic, and one in our society, and specifically our children, don't really know, understand, or follow. And that is authority. Jesus said in Matthew 28 and 18, after his resurrection and prior to his ascension, that all power or authority had been given unto him. All. That means there's none left over. None for us at all. Whatever God speaks on, then that is what man is to do. That means that God has authority. Jesus has authority, and we have none. Literally none, because all of it belongs to Jesus. I don't know if you've ever thought about that before and what the implications of that statement really means. It means that you don't decide how you're going to worship God. You don't decide how you're going to live your life. You don't get to decide any of that stuff if you want to follow God and be acceptable to him. Now, certainly God has made us free moral agents, and so we don't have to do that. But it doesn't make it any less true. And we've had a lot of discussions on truth, and we've talked about this before, and I've often asked people when we talked about this, I saw ridiculous signs both after this election and the one previous to it of stuff that such as Trump is not my president. I don't know what that means. Actually, yes, he is your president, as a matter of fact, and so is Joe Biden, whether you like him or not. You know, before we had presidents, there were things called kings. And it didn't really matter whether you believed in the king's authority or that he was the king or not. It didn't change it. You could say you're not the king. Did it make him any less of a king because you didn't believe that he was a king? No, it did not. Does it make Jesus any less of a king because people say that he's not one, or you don't believe that he is one? No, it does not. Jesus being a king or having all power authority is irregardless of what we believe or think. That's called truth. See, that's the funny thing about the truth. It doesn't change regardless of what we think. And I've had a lot of discussions with people about that. And it is just so important. Jesus and God have authority. Where they have spoken, then we have no ability to change it. The Supreme Court cannot change it. The UN cannot change it. No man can change it. If God has directed what marriage is, then no man can tell anyone what it is. Now, we can make laws and say stuff, but that doesn't make it right, correct, or true. And we've seen that in our own country as recently as 2015. This is a very important concept, and wanted to start with that, and you may be wondering, well, why did you spend so much time on that in this class? Because it really is the foundation of everything that is ever taught up here in this pulpit, that is taught in a Bible class, that if you're coming to church in your own life, if you don't understand authority, then you don't understand God. It's a true statement. You have to understand authority. You have to understand who has it and who does not. And God holds it all, and you hold none. And that's just truth. It's not me speaking. I didn't say that. Some of the things that I'm going to say here today, you may or may not agree with, but they're going to come right from the Word. And if you have a problem with it, as I've told lots of people before in classes that I've spoken, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with God. Because all I'm doing is reading what God's Word has to say about the subject. And so we're going to get into it now, and we're going to start in the beginning, because that's really where it begins, is in the beginning, in Genesis. We're going to come back there eventually, but we're going to go at the end of chapter 1, because this is important. Again, chapter 1, verse 31, it says, "Then God saw everything that he had made," not some of it, not a little bit of it, not a part of it, everything. He saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. God had finished his creation, and he said it was very good. I've had conversations, I don't have time to get into it, but this world is perfect. You may not agree with that statement, but it's true. God never made a mistake, ever. He didn't make a mistake creating this world either. And so if you'd like to discuss that more with me, we can later on. But God made everything, and it was very good. Except one thing was not very good. When we turn to Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18, we read, "The Lord said, 'It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him.'" So God saw Adam. He saw that he needed somebody to help him. And we're going to keep reading, because this is very important, and it's going to have some implications, things that we maybe don't talk about very often, but I'm going to point out. Verse 9, it says, "Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them." There was more to this than just Adam naming the animals, at least the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. And oftentimes we overlook it. We're going to continue to read, and it's going to say, whatever Adam called each living creature, that was his name. So Adam gave names to all the cattle, the birds of the air, and every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper comparable to him. So this first point I'm going to make is Adam was brought in front of him, or it was brought to Adam, all the animals. And God said in his word, there was not a helper comparable to him. In other words, it is not for man to be engaged in lewd acts with animals, ever. It's a thing, people. It happens all over the world. It's disgusting, I know. But it's a thing. There wasn't an animal found comparable. God spoke on that subject. It's closed. There's no animal that's comparable to man. None at all. So in verse 21, God creates it, which he knew he was going to have to do anyways. Remember, if we go all the way back to verse 18, it's not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper. God already knew what was going to happen. The animals marching before Adam was not for God. It was for who? It was for Adam. It was for man. For him to recognize and understand, of all the animals, there's nothing out there for you, Adam. There's nothing out there for you. Don't go looking for it. I'm going to make you something that will be far better. The Lord caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord had taken from man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man." Verse 24, very important. It's also echoed as well later on in the New Testament. You can read it in Ephesians 5 and 31. And it says, therefore the man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Now, we've talked a lot about this in other classes. We're going to talk a little bit more later on. So in describing marriage, as I've said before in my previous class, we talked about the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, those types of questions. We have already answered two of them, the who and the what. The who is everyone. This applies to every person on earth. There's not a single person that's not under the authority of God or this scripture, regardless of whether or not they believe it or accept it. That doesn't change the truth. It is for everyone. Adam and Eve were the first, and then they were the pattern, and after which there would be no change. I want you to make sure, understand too, God could have done what? He could have made out of the rib anything he wanted. What did he do? And we've talked about this before. He made a woman. You notice what he didn't do? Did he take 3 ribs and make 3 women? Could he have done that? Shake your head, yes. He could have. He could have taken 3 ribs and made 3 women. Or not taken any ribs and made 100 women. Or 1,000. Or however many God made. How many did he make? 1. He made 1 woman. That's it. Just one. 1 man, 1 woman. It's an important point. Did he make another man? No, he did not. He did not make another man. That would have been nonsense. Because it would have been what? Over. Right? The grand experiment would have been over. This isn't really an experiment, but it would have been done. That's silliness. He didn't make another man. He made a woman. And only 1 woman. This is important. I've talked about this last time I was in the class, and I'll reinforce it again. God, by what he did, had spoken. He didn't have to say and tell us every other thing that was not necessarily acceptable. It would have taken the entire room, yea, the whole world, to write down everything that was unacceptable. That's silliness. And we've talked about that before. If you believe that, I'm sorry again. You're not thinking correctly. God does not have to direct us. Everything, once he's told us what you can do or what you must do, that excludes what? Everything else. There's nothing else that is included. Nothing. God has spoken. He is the one in authority. He has said, it is 1 man, it is 1 woman, and it is everyone. Because after Adam and Eve came what? The rest of the world, the rest of the population. Nobody was before them. It was just them. God had spoken. He had told us. He's shown us the pattern. The very beginning. 1 man, 1 woman, and they shall become 1 flesh, which is a mystery that will be revealed later on, and that we'll talk about that here as we move on through the study. Okay, so the next question might be, why? Why did God create marriage? Why 1 man and 1 woman? I'm going to give you 4 different reasons why I think it's there. There could be others. I believe that most of the stuff can fall within one of these 4 categories. The last, which we'll spend the most time on, is the most important and is the reason why marriage is so critical and sanctified in the Bible, and why in your mind it needs to be. And we have to understand that regardless of what happens in our society, it's that God has spoken on it, and it's his truth that we must follow, and it is for our good. The first one is for what I'll call social needs. The idea that we are social creatures. We like to have relationships. We like to be together. We like to be with people. That's why we come together right here, why we're commanded, quite honestly, to do that. Because man innately has a need to be with what? Other men, or mankind is really what I mean by that. Right? Animals, while they can be helpful, and certainly we love our pets and we want to be around them, they still don't feel that deep desire and need that we have inside of us to have relationships with other human beings, not just with animals. That social need. I've said this, I hope it's the case in many of your marriages, that whoever your spouse or partner is your best friend. They probably should be. You spend the most time with them, quite honestly, or at least you should. They should be your best friend. Somebody who you're going to have a lifelong relationship with, that you're going to love until the end. They should be your best friend. God made Eve to be a helper. That term helper, or a helper meet for him. Remember we talked about that help meet. We've said that. I actually like it a little bit better the way the King James says it. A helper meet for him. In other words, there were no animals that were meat for him. Not M-E-A-T, M-E-E-T. There were no animals that were going to fulfill the need that the woman was going to be able to fulfill for the man. So the helper, Eve, came along to be meat for him that God created. Social needs. Second, sexual gratification. We don't talk a lot about this at church. I personally don't have a problem with it. I don't necessarily think that we should have how-tos, but I think that it's important to discuss. And we're adults, and that's what this class is about, so we will spend a little bit of time on it. First of all, the idea of sexual relations or those desires are good. They're virtuous. There's nothing wrong with them. I don't know what you teach your children or what you think about that, but it was given to us by God. It's not bad, evil, immoral, or wrong. There are people who believe that and around there, and I do not believe that. And I think that you can find adequate evidence in the Bible to stand by the statement that I'm making. However, God intended for that to be fulfilled in one and only one institution, and that is the institution of marriage that he initiated between Adam and Eve at the beginning. Right? At the beginning. One man, one woman. And that's where it is supposed to. Anything outside of that is wrong. Anything else is called fornication, if you didn't know what that word meant. That is ultimately what fornication is. And any illicit sexual activity outside of a marriage covenant. It's different from adultery. All adultery is fornication, but not all fornication is adultery. So that's the other reason why there is marriage and why God put it together. It's a good thing. It is to be within the confines of the marriage relationship and nowhere else. That's the only place where it's sanctified by God and in the Bible. And there's good reasons for that. I don't have all the time to get into it. We could talk about it later on if you'd like. The third reason, and in my opinion, these kind of go in order of importance in my mind, but you can disagree with me if you like. To facilitate the childbirth and rearing, the family unit. And so why would I say that that is more important than some of the other ones? I've said this before up here, perhaps maybe, I don't know if it was here, but other places, and I've talked with people about it in my work. The family unit is the foundation upon which everything in life is built. It is the building block of a nation. It is the building block of a company. It is the building block of whatever you want. It is the foundation upon which everything else is built. The family unit, a man and a woman together raising kids who will go on and do that as well. Two men can't do that biologically. Two women can't do that. Oh, yes, I know you could have a man and multiple women or a woman and multiple men. Certainly that could happen, but it's not the way God intended it to be. To facilitate childbirth and rearing. All institutions in this earth are built upon the family unit. When you destroy that, as we are doing in this country at breakneck speed, you destroy everything else that you hold of value in this country. Make no mistake about it. The country will fail when the family unit is gone. It will happen, folks. As you continue, or we continue to chip away and destroy the family unit, you will destroy this nation and anything else that you love. It will be gone. You can call me a prophet. Again, came right from here. All I'm doing is telling you what God's word said. It's true. You destroy the family unit, you destroy everything, and we're trying really hard in this country to do it by making it legal. And by the way, I could spend an entire class talking about this. Legality does not equal morality. Don't make any mistake about that either. I don't care what the courts say. I really don't. The courts can tell me all kinds of things that are what's going to be legal. It doesn't matter. It doesn't equal morality. It does not. And if you think that I'm wrong on that, again, you have an incorrect thinking. I'd love to talk to you about that because it's not true. And number 4, the most important, we're going to spend a lot of time on this because this is really the crux of the issue. Number 4, why did God institute marriage? To facilitate the divine plan for human redemption. And that may be like, that's really weird. What do you mean by that, Chris? Well, I mean a few things. First, as we know, Jesus was a man, and he came through the lineage of man all the way back to Adam and Eve. So God's plan of redemption was actually, strangely, man was part of his plan. Kind of weird, in a way, if you stop to think about it. It's also, I talked about that family unit where children learn about authority from their parents. Very important, as I talked about. Kids who don't understand authority don't understand this book or God. They don't understand it. And finally, and the one we're going to spend the most time on, it is the type or antitype of Jesus and the church. And this is why it is so important. This is the reason why marriage is so important. Because it is the picture of Jesus Christ and the church. And when you understand that, then you understand why marriage is so critical and important to God, and why it should be to you and in your own life. It is the picture, and we're going to talk a lot about that. Jesus, how many churches is he coming back for? A lot? Multiple? Is he going to have multiple brides? Anywhere in the Bible, show me a verse in the New Testament, anywhere where there's multiple brides coming for Jesus. And don't give me the parable of the 10 virgins, because I can talk to you about that and what that really represents. Jesus wasn't marrying 10 different virgins. No, there was one bride in that case. There's nowhere in the Bible where it talks about Jesus coming back for anything but a single church. One church. The bride. Not multiple brides. The bride. Jesus is coming back for one. And aren't you glad he's not going to divorce you? Think about that for a minute. Could he? Oh, yeah. Does he have grounds to? He always has, every single day. Let's be honest. If we're honest about our sin in our own lives and the pain that we cause him individually, me personally, what I do that's wrong, he has absolutely all the grounds. Yet he still remains faithful to us, and he's still coming back because he died for the one church. That's it. Just one. Turn in your Bibles to 2 Corinthians chapter 11. We're going to read there about Paul speaking a little bit about the church. Sorry, it'll take me a while. I usually tab it so I don't have to sit here and turn all over the place. But anyway, 2 Corinthians, we're going to look at chapter 11. We're going to look at verse 2. Well, actually, we'll just start in verse 1 because it'll give a little bit of the context. Chapter 11, verse 1. Oh, that you would bear with me in a little folly, and indeed you do bear with me, for I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. A godly jealousy. For I have betrothed you to one husband, not multiple, just one, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. Not multiple virgins, one husband, one virgin betrothed. Paul, understanding the mystery, and he's going to talk about it later on, talking to the Corinthian church, which had a lot of issues. Just bear with me with a little bit of folly, folks. Hear what I have to say. I'm jealous with a godly jealousy. I don't want you whoring after other gods. I want you to be faithful to the one husband that you're betrothed to. That is Jesus Christ. Now, we don't use the word betrothed. In fact, oftentimes we call it engaged. And trust me, it's not the same. Those two words are not the same. If you think they're the same, and if you go look it up in a dictionary, sometimes they equate them, they are not. They have vastly different meanings. Here in America, our whole engagement is like we'll just kind of try it out and see if it works a little bit, and if it doesn't, we'll just call the engagement off and go our separate ways. No. That's not what betrothed means. See, in the Old Testament times, and even in the New Testament times, and even today, the word still means the same thing. It was much more like a marriage. It was a contract. They had committed to being together. And as a matter of fact, the truth is, we still haven't had the marriage feast yet with Jesus, have we? The church actually isn't been with Jesus. In other words, it's not quite yet the bride, if you will. It's not the wife. It is perhaps the bride. It's not the wife yet. We're just what? Betrothed to Jesus right now. Until he returns. When he comes back, and then he does what? He accepts the bride, then the marriage will begin. What do you mean? Well, let's go to Revelation and look there. I know we don't normally go to Revelation for doctrinal issues, but it is important. We can go look at Revelation 19, I think it is. It's in my notes. I remember where I wrote it, but let's see if I can find it here. Hold on. Yeah, 19, 7 through 9. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him the glory. For the marriage of the Lamb has come. The marriage of the Lamb has come. His wife has been made ready, or has made herself ready. And to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen. Notice there's only one. There's not multiple. There's only one. Clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. Then he said to me, "Right, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb." Blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. It hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen. Let's turn to Ephesians chapter 5. We're going to spend some time on this one because this is, again, where Paul spends a lot of time speaking to the Ephesian church. Ephesians chapter 5. Finish. We're going to start in verse 21. Submitting to one another in the fear of God. Wives, submit to your own husbands, as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church. That's authority, folks. FYI. He is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For we are members of his body, and of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason, I want you to listen. What Paul says, he goes back all the way to where? The beginning. Literally, the very beginning of time. This is what he says. He says all of those things. And he says, and here's the reason why. Here's the reason why, Ephesians. Here's why. Verse 31. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. This is the reason. This is a great mystery, verse 32. It was a great mystery. It's not anymore. It was a great mystery. But I speak concerning what? Christ and the church. The marriage from the very beginning, in God's eyes, the one man, the one woman, was Jesus and the church. That's what it's always represented. That's why it's always been critically important. That's why God has always hated divorce. Because he was never going to divorce his church, the bride. Ever. He died for the church. His one and only bride. So that he could sanctify her and bring her to himself, a clean and glorious, without any spot or wrinkle or anything. That's what Jesus did for his bride. That's what marriage is all about. There are also many other passages. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to go over them, where you can talk about Jesus as a bridegroom and church as a bride. If you want to write these down, you can go to Matthew 22, verses 1 through 14. That's the wedding feast. It's a very good one. Matthew 25, 1 through 13, again, the 10 virgins. And Revelation, we already read 19, 7 through 9, the marriage feast of the Lamb. Let's talk about some of the implications of what we have described. We've already talked about the first one that I've mentioned ad nauseum. That he is returning for only one church and only one bride. Make no mistake about it. He's not coming back for multiple. There aren't lots of paths. There's only one Jesus. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. There's no other way to God. There's no other way. There's only one bride. That's it, just one that he's coming back for. We covered two. He's not going to divorce his bride, even for the cause of fornication. He's not. There will be a faithful remnant. The Word has made that clear. I don't have really a lot of time to get into that, but that's something really for men and women who are married and you have maybe have had problems in the past or are dealing with it right now, perhaps, to think very long and hard about Jesus and the church and his attitude about it and what he's going to do, even in the face of very difficult, extremely difficult situations. Number three, we haven't talked a lot about this. When Jesus comes back for the church, is it just for a little time? Is it for 1,000 years? No, it's not. It's for what? Forever. All eternity. Jesus is coming back for the church forever. Till death do us part. Is there going to be any more death? It's going to be, no, there's not. It's going to be swallowed up where? In the lake of fire that will burn forever, along with the devil and his angels and those who choose to follow after him. It will be forever. Forever. The union will be forever. That is why a man and a woman are to stay together for what? Forever. Well, at least as far as earthly time is concerned, until death do us part. Because Jesus is going to be with the church forever. He's not going to accept the church and then, when she gets a little old and wrinkly or she doesn't find a little bit of favor, just going to say, well, sorry, see you later. I'm going to go, well, let's start this over and do something different. That's not what's going to happen. It's never going to happen, folks. Never. You have to understand that. And I already talked about the last one too, and since I only have about maybe 5 minutes left or so, is it 9:45? When do we actually end? Is that right? Yeah, I only have about 5 minutes, and I want to cover a little bit of divorce because I know there's going to be some questions. Okay, we talked about the point number 4 being the fact that we're betrothed, and I covered that already. Okay, so what about divorce? It's a thing. We have it in our country, and the Bible talks about it, right? God made a provision for it. I don't have time to go in and read all of it. It is in the Old Testament. The main verses come from Matthew 19. We can go and look at those here in a minute. If you want to go later on and look about in the Old Testament and talk about it, you can. It's in Deuteronomy 24, the first 14 verses of that. If you want to take a note on that and go read those later on, it talks about it. I will tell you, you need to be careful when you read it and understand what the Hebrew words meant, like uncleanness. That wasn't as is described here, which we'll talk about. So let's just read it really quickly in Matthew 19, 1 through 9. And it's a trap. This is another trap that the Pharisees are going to try to set. Now it came to pass when Jesus finished these sayings that he departed from Galilee, came to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan, and great multitudes followed him. And he healed them there. And the Pharisees also came to him, saying to him, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason?" For any reason. Does Jesus answer the question? He does. Who said yes? Whoever said that, thank you, sir. He does answer the question incredibly well. What does he do? What does he do? The same exact thing that Paul does. He goes where? Back to the beginning. The way it was intended. What God had always thought of it. And what does he say? He answered and says, "Have you not read? He who made them at the beginning made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man shall not leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, or shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, what God has authorized, man, you have no business touching it," is ultimately what he really says there. I'm paraphrasing. What he really says is, then what man is joined together, let not man separate. Man, you have no business getting in what God has authorized and said. You have no business changing in the beginning, God. No business changing for this reason. A man shall leave his father and mother. You have no business. It's not yours to decide. God has spoken on it. And then this is great. Okay, then they respond on, why then did Moses command, which he did not, oh, by the way, command them. There were 10 commandments. What Moses did was give life, other things that were laws or rules, but they weren't a command to give a certificate of divorce and put her away. That wasn't true. And it also wasn't for any cause. Go read Deuteronomy. I don't have time to talk about it. He then said, so this is a trap again, because what? Jesus says he doesn't agree with it. Then, oh, you don't believe in Moses? We knew you were a false prophet all along. Or then if he says, oh, yes, no, you can. Oh, you don't really believe in what Moses said. You don't believe in what he said, because that's not what he said, right? So it doesn't matter what Jesus answers. According to them, at least they think they have him in this trap. Oh, we're going to get him. They don't get him, of course. Jesus tells them, because of you, because of this, what God's always been interested in, the hardness of your heart, he permitted you to divorce your wives. But it was not so. From where? From the beginning. That was not the plan. That was never the plan. But because you're so hard-hearted, you're so stubborn, you want to have authority where you are not given it, God allowed it to happen. And then Jesus clarifies and says, and I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. Jesus has given the one and only scriptural reason for divorce. This is it. This is the specific teaching. Now, we're not going to have time because I'm going to run rapidly out of this to go to 1 Corinthians 7 and talk about 1 through 17, which I know somebody's going to go, well, what about Paul? Well, if I had 3 more lessons, I could talk to you more about this, but I don't, about talking about 1 Corinthians 7. But what I'm here to tell you, and this is all you really need to know, what Jesus spoke right here goes to any marriage of all time ever. And what Paul, and it's not in conflict with what Paul talked about in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Everything that Paul mentions in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is one in relation to specific questions, which we're not told exactly what they are, but we can infer what they are based upon his answer, and is not out of harmony with what Paul says. And everything that Paul says is with this overarching idea in mind. In other words, yeah, okay, you can leave, but guess what? You cannot get remarried again. It doesn't mean, oh, you can leave and then just get remarried. That's nonsensical. Nonsense. It is, I'm sorry. And if you have people telling you that, if you're a preacher standing up and saying it, they're wrong. And they're wrong because they don't know about the beginning and what God intended, or Genesis and the Old Testament and what it says. And they want to usurp the authority from God and put their own ideas into what the Bible says. And you can do that, but make no mistake about it, and this will be my final statement. If you do, you will not be acceptable to God. I don't care what you think or what someone else tells you. And that's not me. That's God and his word speaking. I know I'm very animated and loud. My wife tells me to stop yelling all the time. And I find it hard too because it's just so important. Quite honestly, what we are talking about today and what we do every single Sunday as we come together has implications not for a few years, not for a few decades, not for 100 years, perhaps if you live that long, but forever, for all eternity. And it's just so important. And we just have to understand who has authority, where it comes from, and why we have to listen to it. Thank you for your attention.